Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
You know, I just realized in that intro, we don't say anything about The Hobbit. I don't believe there's any reference at all to anything in The Hobbit.
Sad.
Maybe we need to change that.
Yep.
Before Bilbo, there was Azog. Wait, there was one line.
In the spirit of The Hobbit, we should have Austin do a rendition of
that's the voice
Misty
guy,
Mountain,
buddy.
the Misty
Oh,
Mountains.
there you go. Yeah.
If he can sing, I don't know.
I'd have him just read it. That'd be great. Austin is, just for all y'all who are wondering, Austin Robertson. He's the gentleman who does all of our intros and stinger that we sound. His voice is amazing. If you ever need him, go to austinrobertsonvoice.com and yeah, check him out. He also does all the Babylon Bees voiceovers and everything along those lines. So he definitely has the experience. But on
the very off chance that he listens to this, probably not. But I was pulling my glowing moment. I was doing what glowing does. Glowing's moment in the sun comes in this chapter, or in the shade, as the case may be, because they're actually in the dark, where he is one of the three spurs to Bilbo's Tookish side. There are three things that spur Bilbo on and get him involved in the adventure. 3 times when his Tookish side rises, and the second one is glowing's insults, where he's saying basically, I don't think he's got it in him,
Wait, is he the one who says you're a grocer, not a burglar?
Yes, he calls him a grocer. Okay. It's fantastic. And Bilbo gets very indignant and gives a very English speech, standing on his dignity, as Tolkien says. Yeah, so glowing sparks the Took in him, and he does it by insult, and so I was trying to challenge Austin. I'm sure he can sing.
Yeah. And if not, we'll pretend you can. We'll just say good job. We'll be like, you answered every question. Wait, no, that's wrong.
Oh, no.
All right. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. We are on to the second half of the chapter 1, An Unexpected Party in The Hobbit. The part where Bilbo goes through, meets all the dwarves. They all come in and he's battling with his Tookish side again. Does he want to go out? Does he want to stay in? Does he run and say struck by lightning over and over again, or does he barge in and say, how dare you call me somebody who's incapable? I will come with you to the end of it. And he loves maps more than gold or anything else. He loves maps.
That's the third spur to his Tookish side.
Yeah, so we'll jump into that, and we're going to have an extended edition. We're going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to mention in our Hobbit facts, or Hobbit fact. It's kind of just one fact, Hobbit fact, in just a little bit. Every episode we start with a Hobbit fact, and we also start with reminding y'all that we have supporters for the OneRing.com's Exploring Tolkien podcast who get access to our Discord channel. All the channels on our Discord channel, if you're a freeloader, you can get them by clicking the link in the show notes below in YouTube or on your podcast app. However, you do not get access to the Exploring Tolkien membership areas. So sorry. That is $4 a month. You get the extended podcast, which is about 15, 20 minutes longer, where we get into these things that are a little bit more in depth, and we answer questions and we discuss them. Sometimes we don't have the answers, but we pretend that we do. No, we'll tell you if we don't, but we do. We like something. You challenge us. Boy, I got to bring that up. We have a great quote from, I think it's Michael Drought. Does that name ring a bell? Is that the right person?
Oh yeah.
Who talked about, I'm going to get this here because it's important and I wanted to mention it, about the golf bit we're going to hear about, how golf was created, and some of the details around why it's such an interesting thing that he chose, that Tolkien chose golf. So we'll talk about that. Instead of talk about the Prifton fragment, which is one of the earlier editions of The Hobbit, the earliest manuscript we've got. Anyway, go to theonering.com/member, become a member. First month is free, or go to theonering.com/Patreon, and you can do $5 a month, and the first week is free. And we thanks you for your supports. We thank you for your support. Appreciate it, guys. Keeps us going. Also, hey, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff, because I don't have a good pithy way of saying it, but I don't say it often enough, apparently. And if I don't remind you guys, you're not going to click on it. If you don't click on it, other people aren't going to find us. If you don't find us, we're not going to have as interesting conversations. And what I want is to have interesting conversations with all the people listening, because it's far better than
respect the logic train that he just laid out for you.
Sorry.
In order to have interesting conversations,
Yeah. Become a member.
you must become a member.
that sounds so bad. Okay. All right. We got something.
Actually, the truth is we're going to have interesting conversations no matter what. But for you all to listen to them, then this helps.
Okay. Interesting conversation number 1, and the only one we're having today, is about The Hobbit. Part 2, essentially what we're deeming part 2 of the first chapter, An Unexpected Party. This is episode 3.
Yep. To recap part 1, we ended on the conversation between Gandalf and Bilbo, where Bilbo says good day a number of times means a bunch of different things, and Gandalf finds this amusing, scratches something on his beautiful, as we found out, recently painted door. We found out from the second half of the chapter. And also there's apparently a bunch of hobo marking. This is a world of hobo markings as well. Have you heard about this in the real world? So
no.
Apparently, I just listened to a podcast on it. Apparently, there's a bunch of signs and figures that people that move from place to place with no home, who prefer to call themselves hobos. They they have a glyph language of some kind where they leave symbols places, which tells the fellow hobos this is a good place for a meal, this is danger, stay away from this, and a bunch of different markings. What I found hilarious was apparently that's the case with dwarves, at least, that because Gloin is very specific about the mark that Gandalf left on the door, which it's a very complicated mark for something that was scratched on a door with the end of his walking stick, or his staff. So yeah, we'll get to that. But mostly this whole chapter, I was struck this time reading through it carefully by how domestic this is. This whole chapter is very domestic, at great contrast, of course, to where we're going to end up in The Hobbit, in the lair of a dragon at the end, near the end, in an epic battle between armies. But here just starts with drawing rooms and tea and a variety of English foodstuffs and practices that were incredibly domestic. And I was realizing that as I've been reading to my children over the years, this is one of the things that hooks them in. It happened with the last child I have, who's my 7-year-old. She's listening to this for the first time, and she was mesmerized by the talk of the food and the different kinds of food that the dwarves demand and Bilbo serves, and Bilbo's running back and forth as the dwarves trickle in. All 13 dwarves trickle in. He's running back and forth, getting them food, getting them drink, trying to be a good host, cursing under his breath about the dwarves, about them, and the word of the day is confusticate, which is an awesome word. And in fact, in the annotated edition that
you just
Jonathan kindly got,
it's nice.
It says that Tolkien made it into the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, most famous English dictionary in the world. His quotation of the word confusticate makes it in there as one of their examples of an archaic word, which appears first before him, before Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. It appears in the late 1800s, but it's a word that I'd never seen used before. It's a great word, confusticate.
Well, you know what we don't know, because we haven't gone to this, is we don't know if he put that in his first copy of his manuscript, because we have to get to our Hobbit fact, Michael, first before we jump into that.
My bad.
Sorry, man. Jeez. I know you want to jump the gun.
Back off, Michael. I got it. I smell what Jonathan's cooking.
So today's
Hobbit facts
is that this comes from the History of the Hobbit, which is the most in-depth book about the Hobbit that you can get. You can get a Kindle version. Apparently, it's incredibly hard to get a print version, because I ordered one and it's been 4 weeks and it's still not shipped yet. They're still saying it's August. So here's the thing. It has a section of it that's called the Prifton Fragment. Now, if you remember from last week, Prifton is the original name of Smaug. And the author of the History of the Hobbit just decided to name that because it I guess sounded good. He doesn't tell us why. But Here's what it is. It's a fragment of 6 pages of the original manuscript of The Hobbit that's been preserved. And we don't know what's happened to the other missing pages of that original manuscript because it starts in the middle, actually, of the section. It doesn't start at the very beginning, so we don't know where the first parts of the Priftin fragment are. But what it does have, it has the different names, the original names of Gandalf, Bloodorthin, and Priftin. It has even more references, and I'll read this in our extended edition if you guys listen in even more references to our world today, mentioning Hindu Kush, the great desert of Gobi, and the wild worms of the Chinese. So when he says wild worms there, it almost makes me think dragons rather than WORMS, even though that's how it's spelled there, WYRMS, which would mean that Peter Jackson was completely wrong in bringing up the worms in in The Hobbit. And
you mean the Shai-Hulud from Arrakis? Yeah,
that make their way into Middle Earth.
Yeah, somehow burrowed their way through space and time into Middle Earth.
Yeah, and what's funny about it is this fragment. It just stops. Like he just stops writing in the middle of a sentence, and it's not at the end of it. It's not missing anything. It just stops in the middle of a sentence, which is there is no time to lose. You must be off before daybreak and well on your way, dwarves. And that's it. It just ends there. So apparently the muse stopped at that point. And
I like to imagine that he was sitting there writing and he knocked over his cup of tea or something. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. So he goes to clean it up. And then as he's cleaning it up, he's just that he's going through all his doubts that he's had about this rewrite and just decides to scrap it.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's interesting. And Thorns, we talked about names being Gandalf was originally Thorin. Bloodorthin was originally Gandalf. The original Bloodorthin was the name of Gandalf, as we know Gandalf. And Priftin was the name of Smaug. And also Thror, Thorin's grandfather, was named Fimblefamby.
That's
hilarious. But these are all names that come from I believe the Prose Edda. These are all dwarven names from that. So he took them directly out of that. Fimblefamby was one of them. He just decided that was good, but decided later perhaps it's a little odd.
Wasn't
the rest of them. Anyway, there you have your Hobbit fact. I'll come up with one of these every week. Okay, back to chapter 1, part 2, talking about the Englishness of it. The what was the word you used? The
domesticity.
Domesticity.
Right. So this is a very domestic tale. Like everything about the Hobbit hole and the dinner and the dwarves was fascinating. And has been to my children as I've been reading it. I realize, this is part of what makes it a children's story. Is this is a very, it's an English tale. It's an English turn of the 20th century-ish, late 19th. Definitely not a medieval world. He's got doorbells and drawing rooms and all sorts of. There's a reference in here, funnily enough, to the whistle of an engine.
Yeah, right. I'm surprised he never took that one out since he took other things.
Well, he deliberately considered it because he rewrote the annotated version. Said he rewrote some of it, but he never went with a rewritten line. He just kept it in.
Yeah.
So it's the food. You got cake and you got all different kinds of alcohol. You got beer and wine and porter and ale and tea and coffee and just all sorts of drinks of various sorts. But you have cakes and scones and jam and tarts and mince pies and cheese, pork pies and salad and chicken and pickles and it's like this feast. And the kids love it. They love that part. They also love, because my children do dishes, they loved the chip the glasses and crack the plates song, which they all learned. And that was a fine tradition because I taught it to my brothers and sisters when I was young and read The Hobbit, and we all chanted it while we were doing dishes as a kid. So that tradition has continued in the Grumbine household.
Well, I'll ask you then, did you say it in the same way that Tolkien sang it? Because we have a recording.
I've never heard him sing it. Well, we chanted it. We just do. It was just a kind of a chant, not a song. So
it is a chant, really.
Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Crack the bottles.
Smash the bottles.
smash the bottles and burn the corks. So I'm not actually reading as I'm just
I get it.
doing it from memory.
I
But
actually
anyway,
here. Let's listen to Tolkien actually say it.
you got it? Awesome.
I have it here. So it was the cool thing about getting the Kindle version of The Hobbit is it actually has a recording of Tolkien singing "Chip the Glasses and Crack the Plates," and I was able to take that, and it's really low quality, but I was able to take that, and thanks to the magic of AI, you can actually run through some processors that pull out all the background noise, the old tape hiss and everything like that, and increase his volume. So anyway, check this out. This is how Tolkien sounds relatively clearly about the chip the glasses and crack the plates.
Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. The bottles and burn the corks. Cut the cloth and tread on the fat. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. Splash the wine on every door. Dump the clocks in a boiling bowl. Pound them up with a thumping pole. And when you finish, if any are whole, send them down the hall to roll. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates, so carefully, carefully with the plate. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates, so carefully, carefully with the plate.
Awesome.
Isn't that great?
Well done. That is amazing, all the background noise taken out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't heard that recording, but I've heard others of Tolkien, and they're just always old. There's just that white noise sort of. That's fantastic. Well, AI is good for something. That's great. I haven't heard the melody before. I never thought of what the melody would be. So
yeah, and it's funny because there's also the recording of him with the Misty Mountain's Cold song that the dwarves sing, but that one he just reads it straight up.
Oh, okay. I was going to say because one of the few things that I really love about the Hobbit movie was they did a fantastic job of that Misty Mountain song.
They did.
They really did. I mean, really, the first half an hour, 40 minutes of the Hobbit movie is a totally different thing from the last half of that movie.
Yeah. Okay.
That first movie.
The first half was great.
And then what I was going to say about that song is really funny. I actually, when I was a kid, the idea of having a thumping pole, like, what on earth is a thumping pole? Like, what do you have a thumping pole for? It's a thing that apparently exists that Tolkien is suggesting, that dwarves are jokingly suggesting they use it on the Hobbit's crockery. But the question becomes, like, what is a thumping pole? I mean, is it just a pole? So when I was a kid, I decided that I was going to have a thumping pole, and except I would thump my brothers with it.
No, that's far better than using it on the the crocks in a boiling bowl.
So I would.
So he's essentially saying crack everything on purpose. Now break everything, put them up in there, and I will pound them to dust.
Oh, and my kids love this. They love that song, the idea of destruction. But the fact that dwarves are also doing the dishes while to quote Tolkien. And of course, they did none of these dreadful things, and everything was cleaned and put away safe and quick as lightning, while the Hobbit was turning round and round in the middle of the kitchen, trying to see what they were doing. Then they went back and found Thorin with his feet on the fender, smoking a pipe. There's a fender, too, apparently. Also, not medieval technology.
No, that's true. Let's take a little bit of a step back and talk about how all the dwarves come in, right? Because, thinking back to the film, thinking back to this, they all come in at different moments. Two things that struck me is, one, is it the same thing as if you've read The Hobbit, as the Bjorn scene, right? Gandalf decides to take them in slowly so as not to, like, he's treating Bilbo like he treats Bjorn. So that's from one angle, from Gandalf's angle. The other angle is, why is Bilbo so polite? And is the politeness part of the Hobbitness? And so when I love, there's a line at the end of the chapter where he just doesn't care. He's like, he took all their breakfast orders. And is like, I don't care. I'm not going to make anything for you guys.
Yep.
And it's like the politeness is almost it's like the Hobbit side, and then not caring is like the Tookish side. I'm more
the Baggins. Yep, it's the Baggins versus the Tookish side. So the Baggins side is eminently English. It's eminently English. Everything about, the Baggins side is the side that, it's bag end, right? So it's right. All that domesticity, all that 19th century technology, and the world of English drawing rooms and tea and different meals of sorts, the high politeness, the doorbell, the calling at different hours. This is all 19th century English domesticity. And that's the Baggins side. And the Tookish side rises up against it. Like you said at the very end, it rises up against to refuse to make them breakfast that they had just all ordered. But at different points, it rises up. And the Tookish side is frankly the side of the Hobbit of Bilbo Baggins that the story is based on. Because without the Tookish side, there is no adventure. And that's what Gandalf saw in him with their conversation at the door. And I think that if I was to answer that question, there seems less planning by Gandalf to answer your question about the staggered introductions of the slow arrivals of the dwarves versus the staggered introductions at the House of Bjorn.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that there's less. We could compare when we get to the Bjorn house. It would be fun. But in general, I would say less planning by Gandalf, but deliberate by Tolkien. And I can invent, or at least notice, I can notice a reason for that, which is that there is probably no way that if they had all 13 showed up at once, that Bilbo would have been coerced into hosting them.
Right.
And he would have just been faced with the reality of what Gandalf was doing to him, and he would have probably just rejected it. It requires 3 steps for his Tookish side to be fully drawn out and him to agree to adventure. And those steps are music, insults of his dignity, and then the one at the end that you mentioned, which was maps.
Mm-hmm.
So his love of maps. And he's enamored with the map that Gandalf pulls out. So you got 3 elements, and each time his Baggins side is reacting against the dwarves and he's scared. In fact, at one point he shrieks, and that's what causes the dwarves to, or Gloin specifically, father of Gimli, has his moment in the dark where he doubts Bilbo's character and ability to carry out burglary on this adventure. Bilbo responds to the insults. He's in the other room composing himself and listening to Gloin insult him, because presumably dwarves have very loud voices, deep voices, and he comes back in a huff, or on his dignity, as Tolkien says, and defends himself, and the Took rises up inside of him, and I mean, that's the most shocking one. It's the most shocking because he basically takes on an adventure, agrees to an adventure that he doesn't even know what it is. Yeah. So maybe we'll read the 3 parts. Let me just reference the one after the Misty Mountain song. We have things to say about the Misty Mountain song, but it says, as they sang, the hobbits felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him. A fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something Tookish woke up inside of him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls and explore the caves and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. What's fascinating to me is the dwarves' song awakens a dwarfish part of him, like he has the desires of a dwarf, but then the Tookish side of him has different desires, but they happen to be in line with the dwarvish thing because he wants to go and see those things, but the Tookish side of him rises up. So that's the first time the Tookish side rises up. And then while he's listening to Gloin insult him, after it says then Mr. Baggins turned the handle. He turns the handle to go back into the room with the dwarves and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast, to be thought fierce. So there's one part of the Tookish side we just read was the exploration side. And then the second part of the Tookish side is he would go without food. This is a great sacrifice for hobbits. He would go without food to be thought fierce. So the desire to be thought courageous is a thing that rises up. As for, quote, little fellow bobbing on the mat, close quote, that was Gloin's quote about him, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it. Pardon me, he said, if I have overheard words you were saying. I don't pretend to understand what you are talking about or your reference to burglars, but I think I am right in believing, this is what he called being on his dignity, that you think I am no good. I will show you. I have no signs on my door. It was painted a week ago, and I am quite sure you have come to the wrong house. As soon as I saw your funny faces on the doorstep, I had my doubts. But treat it as the right one. Tell me what you want done, and I will try if I have to walk from here to the east of East and fight the wild werewolves in the last desert. I had a great-great-grand-uncle once, Bulwer took, and... Yes, but that was long ago, said Gloin. I was talking about you and I assure you, there is a mark on this door, the usual one in the trade, or used to be. Burglar wants a good job, plenty of excitement, and reasonable reward. That's how it's usually read. You can say expert treasure hunter instead of burglar if you like. Some of them do. It's all the same to us. Gandalf told us there was a man of the sort in these parts looking for a job at once, and that he had arranged for a meeting here this Wednesday, tea time. So, and then Gandalf goes on to defend his lie, because that's just straight up a lie. Like, there's no Bilbo is not someone who was seeking a job
Right.
of this sort at all, which is very, very funny. Gandalf has much more of the Nordic character of his originally written and conceived character than the more virtuous version in Lord of the Rings. But anyway, that was really cool transition to me, because Bilbo he rises and he actually makes the decision to go on an adventure with them without even knowing what it is. He's like, I think you have the wrong house, but let's say you got the right one. I'm going to do this thing.
It's like, yeah, that is by far the most Tookish side. That's like it just rolled over anything that was there. The insult was far too much. The music was building the foundation. But the insults, it put him over the edge. Like,
and then the final sinker, the hook, is the map, which we'll get to later. But this is this is the height. This is when he makes the decision and he says he's going to do it.
Let's go back to the Misty Mountain song as that first point, because
love that song.
We talked about the food. We talked about the domesticity. I still don't know how Bilbo would have that much food for him living alone in that house, unless he was planning a birthday party. I don't know. Maybe there's.
Well, you have to remember he takes visitors sometimes, and the hobbits eat 6 meals a day. There's just going to be
a good point.
There's going to be a larder and a storage of food. I have no doubt that he probably depleted most of it feeding everybody. But
yeah, right. So in that idea of domesticity of it, sort of our world. And Tolkien makes the point, we'll talk about this in the extended podcast, which you can get by going to thewondering.com/member. The music is where the Middle Earth that he's creating in his other notes, right, in his other stories, in Luthien and Beren and Gondolin and Melian and Thingol and all those other characters, it intrudes into the Hobbit very directly in the song. So when he gets into the song, I think we see the things that are indicative of, write what you know and what he knows when it comes to the history of a fantasy world, of a cosmology he's created, is these little parts. And so when we read lines like, for ancient king and elvish lord, there many a gleaming golden hoard they shaped and wrought, and light they caught to hide in gems on hilt of sword. And it just made me think of ancient king and elvish lord. It made me think of Thingol hoarding, Thingol getting the Silmaril, and then he didn't put it in the hilt of a sword. But then here on silver necklaces they strung the flowering stars. That's not a coincidence that he mentions flowering stars. On crowns they hung the dragon fire in twisted wire. They meshed the light of moon and sun. Those lines are there seem such a direct callback to what we read in the Silmarillion. The light of the moon and the sun, the mesh, the silver necklaces they strung the flowering stars on, right? And on crowns they hung, right? The Silmaril was burning on the
the capturing of light and the hanging of light in crowns. And I mean, this is the Silmarillion. I have no doubt that Tolkien's writing a story for children, but of course he can't help himself to bring in these elements from this. When he first writes it, he's not imagining this is connected with with what we now call Middle Earth, but this is a product of his imagination. And so in his world, elves catch light and put it in gems and in crowns, and that's what he does. That's what the dwarves sing about.
And in his world, apparently golf is invented. And that the whole golf line, it's the Tom Bombadil moment of this. Yeah, it sticks out a little bit, like a sore thumb. I don't know. Well, the first time you read it, were you like, wait, what? Like, I remember kind of going, oh, the golf? Oh, okay, that seems out of place. But again,
I first read it when I was 9 years old, and I thought it was hilarious. I just thought that, like, the idea of, what's funny is that, not to get too gory, but decapitations are pretty messy. But the idea of decapitating a goblin and knocking its head clean off and down into a hole and inventing a game out of it was, to my probably male, but maybe not just male mind, 9-year-old mind, was hilarious.
Yeah,
I
right.
laughed out loud when
Okay.
I first read that.
So let me read this paragraph where he talks about inventing golf. This is again we're talking about. This is at the point that they're talking about how Bilbo is Bilbo's been scared, and they're trying to say, he's got some gumption in him. And this is what Tolkien wrote: "If you have ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you will realize that this was only poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit, even to old Took's great granduncle Bullroarer, who was so huge for a hobbit that he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins of Mount Graham in the Battle of the Green Fields and knocked their king Golfimbull's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole, and in this way the battle was won and the game of golf invented at the same moment."
That's a fantastic imagination. But isn't that like he's combining 19th, 20th century England with a fairy story of lore, with lore and goblins and the fight, battles. It's so Tolkien. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Did you know though that Golfimbull wasn't the first name he put in there for the Goblin King's name? Can you guess what it was? You know the name. And it has the word golf in it.
Fingolfin?
Yes. In the original manuscript, which we'll read in the extended podcast, he uses Fingolfin as the name instead of Golfimbull.
Oh, I'm so glad he changed that. I love Fingolfin, the character. And the fact that it just doesn't even sound like a goblin's name.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But it's a testament to Tolkien that I would use such a line as I just did, because he's the one that has shaped our imaginations so powerfully in what an elvish name or a dwarvish name or a goblin name might actually sound like. Because he's the one that has created he's applied his love of philology to mythic races and given us sounds of words. So that's great.
I'm going to bring up this point that Old Man Reader in our Discord chat made in our Exploring Tolkien channel.
All right.
Which you can only get to by going to theoneroom.com/member. But he listened to a discussion on The Hobbit, which I haven't had a chance to listen to because he just posted this yesterday, I think. Yeah. Where he discusses certain things about The Hobbits by Michael Drought, who's a well-known Tolkien scholar.
One of the best Tolkien scholars in the world.
He was at Hillsdale College, and he gave a talk, and it's free to listen to. So I'm going to put the link below. Let me make a note to put the link below in the show notes. Link to Drought discussion. But Old Man Reader, he makes this point, and this is really interesting. Drought calls the invention of golf a dad joke that Tolkien shared with his children, probably to groans. But there is an academic issue behind it. Golf is one of those words which have no etymology, not even close. But sometimes words come from the name of someone associated with the idea, like boycott or mesmerize. Drought suspects that Tolkien invented just such an etymology for golf. The Goblin King's name was Golfimbull, in earlier drafts, Fingolfin. Another little proof that The Hobbit was anything but just a children's story, but it was also a children's story because it melded the two sides of it, right? So, for instance, Bilbo describes the mad adventures that Gandalf inspired as anything from climbing trees, which is what little children would do, as something a mad adventure there, to visiting elves. Right. And so he puts these things in that are this mesh of high medieval, like a goblin king with a battle and the head, his head getting chopped off, but then it becomes an etymological. It becomes part of the etymology of the word golf by throwing in Golfimbull. Because it doesn't have an etymology. Nobody knows where the word golf came from. I did not know that. I will put the link below to the entire hour-long discussion.
That's fantastic. I want to listen to that. I like Michael Drought a lot, and so I'm looking forward to that.
So if you've ever wondered why he put this golf thing in, it's 1, because he loves words, 2, because he thought his children would love it, and 3, it's a dad joke. And who among us who are dads don't love throwing in dad jokes whenever and wherever that we can?
It is so true. It is so true.
And then I gotta say, man, I love the people, the guys who are and girls. Sorry, everybody. I hate it when
Guys
I
means
like that.
both
I
men
know,
and women.
I know, I know. All the folks, all the people, all the wonderful sons and daughters. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Who are in our chat because they bring up these things that I would never find. I would never have found Michael Drout's discussion at Hillsdale College because it's not easy to find. So anyway, that's probably more than you ever wanted to know about golf. All right, let's move on from the golf idea. So we have, right. So one, you have the high end, the Silmarillion. He brings that in. You have the kind of lower dad humor of golf, and then you have the consistent domesticity. And as we get into it, like I like the idea that you threw out there with the 3 reasons that pushed Bilbo to his Tookish side. And I think, if you had to nail it down, I feel like what is the biggest thing that pushed him in? Is it his fear of being noted as just a grocer? Is it the insult that was really what pushed him over the edge the most? Because he still has the fear, but he doesn't let it overtake him anymore.
Right. It says, and the line right before the one I read was from Gloin. It's the final insult that Gloin gives. He looks more like a grocer than a burglar. So, and then Bilbo turns the handle and walks in. And I think the most important line about how he makes the decision and why, to answer your question, is he suddenly felt he would go to without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. So he's willing to even agree to an adventure that he doesn't know what the terms of it are, in order to be thought fierce. So he loves the music. He gets drawn in by the music. He loves the maps. He gets drawn in by the map later on. But it's really this desire to be thought fierce. And to me, this is a core rational desire for all free peoples. It's the desire to be thought virtuous. Fierceness is a synonym for courageousness. And so he desires to be courageous and to be thought courageous, which is very interesting. And that pushes him over the edge. That's the Tookish side, even more than the exploration, even more than the maps.
But it's the map. I love that the map. It's not the money. It's not. I mean, the making a name for yourself is one thing, but it's the map that's the sort of the final straw. It's the maraschino cherry on top that makes it that much better. That going out and seeing the world is that Tookish side. That's the final, the final puzzle piece. You might have seen the whole pictures right so far, but it's not complete until you add the idea that the journey is what I want to experience.
Right. Exactly. And the part that we're talking about, we've referenced it a few times, so I thought we should probably read it. And that's when the map has been gotten out. Thorin dismisses the map that Gandalf has found. Gandalf later explains why he shouldn't dismiss it, because he got it from Thorin's father, Thrain. But he goes and, did I say Thrain or Thror?
His grandfather's Thror, his father's Thrain.
Yeah.
So he got it from
Thrain, his father. No, his grandfather died.
Right.
His grandfather died in Moria.
Right.
Azog.
Yes.
His father died in the dungeons of the necromancer.
Right.
And that's where Gandalf got the map from. But before Gandalf has explained that, Thorin is dismissive of the map, and Gandalf says you didn't note that it shows a secret entrance, and it talks about the height of the entrance, which is 5 feet high and 3 may walk abreast, which, if you think about it, is a very wide doorway. 3 being able to walk abreast means you're talking, even if you're talking about hobbits and stuff, you're talking about at least 8 feet wide, probably 7 feet wide, a couple feet per hobbit or dwarf, and then 5 feet high. So for us, it would be a very low door. And then it says, "It seems a great big hole to me," squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps, and in his hall there hung a large one of the country round. I love how that's capitalized, the country round, with all his favorite walks marked on it in red ink. How could such a large door be kept secret from everybody outside apart from the dragon? He asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. What I love about that, too, is that he's got his favorite walks marked in red on this massive map, which is this this love of perambulation is a direct call to Tolkien himself, who was loved walking the countryside and definitely had his own favorite hikes and walks that he would take. And so Bilbo is Tolkien is definitely channeling his own desires and putting them in Bilbo's heart.
So moving forward, when Thorin tells the story of Smaug and how Smaug, comes and destroys Dale, comes in, kills all the dwarves, drives them out. Those who are left, takes over. And we made the point earlier of the sort of the high fantasy comes in, the Silmarillion, and then you have the kids jokes coming in with the Hobbit. You're right. He's smearing it's a kid's story, but adults can read it. Is the way that I look at it. And we're not talking like Shrek, where it puts in only humor adults can understand. So things that are inappropriate. One of the lines that stuck out to me this time that I never thought of before, really, was when he talks about why the dragon came in the first place. So let me read this here. This is Thorin speaking. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvelous and magical toys, the like of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Undoubtedly, that was what brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, from men and elves and dwarves wherever they can find them. And so this whole line, like, he mentions armor and jewels once, he mentions toys twice in that line. And so after the line, the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north, immediately he says, undoubtedly that was what brought the dragon. Now, I don't think he means that it was just the toys that brought the dragon, but to the children listening and reading it, that brings a oh yeah, the toys. That is the important thing. The wonderful, amazing toy market of Dale, which the dwarves were there kindling into something that was something to be noted. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting that the toys are such an important part of it.
I love that, and this is also undeniably one of the things that makes the focus on the toys is what makes this a children's story. It's one of the signs, I should say, that makes it a children's story. Not the fact that there's 2 lines about toys, but the fact that he's focused on the things that fire up the imagination of children. Now, gems and gold also fire up the imagination, so he talks about those. But he talks about magical toys too, and I would point out that Tolkien here is a lot more liberal with the use of the term magic than it becomes later on in Lord of the Rings. Although he does use the term magic in Lord of the Rings a few times, he's a lot more guarded about that term than but here in this book he just throws it around all over the place. There's magic everything's. This is definitely
magic cufflinks that don't come off.
Yeah, magic diamond studs. Yep,
diamond studs. That was it. Yeah.
That don't come out, which is another proof that this is 19th century England in a Hobbit hole.
Right.
Like these studs that basically, instead of buttons, they would each there'd be a set of studs that would go down to hold because buttons weren't attached permanently to your shirt. So this is clearly 19th century. Everything from that to the whistle of the engine, which is a reference to, of course, to trains.
I'm still surprised he didn't take that one out.
It's to fire the imagination of children. There's a level to this book which is not, and I have become to the opinion that, especially with the abandonment of his rewrite, which was supposed to bring it more in line with Lord of the Rings, that Tolkien just started with that and finished with that. This is going to be a children's book. Yes, I'm going to connect it to Lord of the Rings, but this is just a children's book. And one of the gems I found from this annotated version of The Hobbit that I'd never known before was that Tolkien liked the work of Arthur Ransom, who's an author in the early 1900s who wrote, amongst a lot of homeschoolers and other people that have read a lot of old literature, There's a series of children's stories about the adventures of a family of children that become orphaned called Swallows and Amazons, and Arthur Ransom is the author of that, and Tolkien loved that. In fact, those stories about this family of children remind me very much of C.S. Lewis. I have no doubt C.S. Lewis read Arthur Ransom too, having read both. The Narnia Chronicles and the dynamic of the four children, and this being an adventure of children is definitely an Arthur Ransom owes a lot. But apparently Arthur Ransom liked The Hobbit very much, and Tolkien was very taken with the fact that he liked it, and he was convalescing. He was near the end of his life, but he actually suggested a few edits that Tolkien took up and edited. One of them was when Gandalf comments on Bilbo shrieking and almost passing out. Gandalf says, "Excitable little fellow," but originally it said "excitable little man." And Arthur Ransom, from his convalescing home, writes back to Tolkien and says, "Did you mean to say man? Because he's not a man." and Tolkien says basically, quite right. And he changed it. Although, funnily enough, he left other references about a man in there. He's referred to obliquely as a man in other places. When Gandalf, they're talking about when Gandalf searched for a burglar or a hero or something. But anyway, in this particular case, "excitable little fellow," that line was from Arthur Ransom, which is a cool note. I didn't know. My wife and kids who love the Arthur Ransom books, the Swallows and Amazons books, will be happy to hear that.
All right. So as we close out this chapter, I just love how it ends with, I'll read it.
Little spite.
Little spite, right?
Little Tookish
where he says, "Hey, when you go tomorrow, I'll give you a good breakfast." And Thorin is like, "Before we go, I suppose you mean, aren't you the burglar and isn't sitting on the doorstep your job? Not to speak of getting inside the door. But I agree about bed and breakfast. I like 6 eggs with my ham when starting on a journey, fried, not poached. And mind you, don't break them." I'm like, wow, man, this guy's like, this is like he's in a 5-star hotel here, ordering.
Dwarves are the worst guests.
Yeah, they are. Yes. And then he writes this: "After all the others had ordered their breakfast without so much as a please," which annoyed Bilbo very much, because you remember, he remembered his manners a couple of times earlier in the story, and so that's very important to him. So regardless of his Tookish side, please and thank you and welcome is important to him. They all got up. The Hobbit had to find room for them all and filled all his spare rooms and made beds on chairs and sofas before he got them all stowed and went to his own bed, very tired and not altogether happy. One thing he did make his mind up about was not to bother to get up very early and cook everybody else's wretched breakfast. I love it's not just breakfast. You can tell it's spiteful. It's like, I am so done with these dwarves. It's a wretched breakfast now. You've taken all my seed cakes. You've taken all my ale and porter and coffee and tea. And now you're going to there's no way I'm making you breakfast. And he writes, the Tookishness was wearing off and he was not now quite so sure he was going on a journey in the morning. So maybe the last firecracker of Tookishness was that I'm not making you breakfast anymore. And then after that, maybe probably a little bit of regret inside for being this kind of a host, but certainly, that was taking over.
I do like how we have the first stanza to the Misty Mountains song that he hears Thorin humming as he goes to sleep, which gives him very uncomfortable dreams, as Tolkien says. But that song itself was, if we remember, that was the first spark of the Tookishness that actually got him on the path to making the decision to say that he would go with them and accomplish whatever the task was they had for him as a burglar. So it was great, and that does lead me to the segment of our podcast which we sometimes have called "If You Like Tolkien." Break.
If you like Tolkien.
No break necessary. We got it, man. I'm right here for you.
I was giving you a little run up.
I know. I was like, okay, quickly go open the tab, go there.
So if you like Tolkien, then you and Tolkien's songs especially, which, as Jonathan and I have often mentioned, are an integral part of his work. He lets nary a chapter go by in either The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings in which someone is not singing something. There's not a song of some sort or being or music being played. And if you like Tolkien, then you will like the work of Clamavi de Profundis. This is Latin, 3 words, Clamavi de Profundis, which we'll link here in the notes. And they are a family who does all kinds of both a cappella and original and orchestrated works. And they have taken the liberty. They started out many years ago, after the Hobbit movie came out, by doing a full version of the Misty Mountain song. You notice in the movie, they sing 2 or 3 verses, I think 2 or 3 stanzas, 3 stanzas. But the song is much longer, and Clamavi de Profundis does a ton of Tolkien. And in fact, they go through one of my favorites that they do is the Lament by Galadriel, called the Marie. And there's all sorts of Dwarven songs and Lord of the Rings songs. They also have other songs. They do some religious music and other kinds of music. They even do video game music. They did a couple songs from Skyrim or Elder Scrolls, and because they have a number of male voices in their family which are very deep, and so they do these great Dwarven imitations. The Song of Durin is a fantastic one too. So anyway, if you can preview their songs on YouTube, or you can go and buy their music on their own channel, or a lot of their music is on Apple. And anyway, if you like Tolkien, I think most of you will like their work of a number of Tolkien's songs.
Right, and it's clear. I mean, they've got 1,177 paying Patreon subscribers right now, so it's not like they're very small. Like that's actually pretty good for Patreon, for just a niche kind of music group, right?
Yeah,
so.
they're very niche. They're very niche. I love their voices, especially with the dwarf songs. So definitely would recommend.
Where are they located? Do you know?
I don't know, and they've hidden it well. I did a little research to see if I could figure out where the family lives, but I can't. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure, but they are a family, and so anyway, so they have a soft spot for me. They're a larger family that I am happy to support. And I think a lot of our listeners would like their music. Maybe many of you have already heard them, but in any case,
we'll need to try. I wonder. There's got to be a way we can get them on the show. It'd be great. It'd be fun. I will try and figure this out.
We'll take a shot at it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get into our extended podcast. Of course, thewonder.com/Patreon. You've heard me say it a million times. How important is it? Well, it's important. Keeps us going. Keeps people listening. Also, subscribe if you've gotten through this the whole way. We do appreciate that.
You've either been asleep or you have perseverance.
Right. There's no Rings of Power title in here, so YouTube doesn't throw it into their algorithm and rank it up into the charts. So between this here and our downloads, right? You few thousand people who listen to us, we appreciate you very much. And we're going to jump into our extended podcast. Talk about a question from Fra about how much is the Hobbit really in Middle Earth? And you can saw in our title last week is like the Hobbit was not originally in Middle Earth. It was not. The way that he wrote it, he just wrote what he knew, and so things from Middle Earth got injected into it. But as a part of the same world as Fingolfin, and because obviously Fingolfin was going to be the original name, right? The name of it, he was going to give the goblin the golf name from Fingolfin, which was not exactly part of Middle Earth, but it's in there. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the that Priftin fragment a little bit, and go from there. So everybody, join us there, thewonder.com/member. We'll see you on the other side.
And goodbye, freeloaders.